And we're live. Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Claire, and I'm the event coordinator for Village Books in Bellingham and Linden, Washington. We are delighted that you could join us today from wherever you might be tuning in. I'm pretty sure that we've got people that are watching from all parts, so we appreciate your being here. Before we begin, if you've never been on a Crowdcast event before, I want to let you know a couple of things. If you're hearing an echo, there's a few things that you can do. You can make sure that you just have one tab open in your browser. You can turn down the volume of your computer, or you can put in some headphones. If you wear some headphones, that might take care of any feedback issues that you might be having. Also, let's see. Our events at Village Books happily are still free to attend. However, we do offer the option to contribute, make a small financial contribution at registration. And to those of you who did that, I really want to extend my thank you, my gratitude. To say that this is a challenging time is an understatement, as we all know. So your contributions to our event programming are very helpful. And even if you didn't, that's fine. I'm just glad that we still get to provide this free programming that people are used to from Village Books. So thank you. I do want to let you know, however, that right below me, there's a green button that says purchase books here. If you happen to be watching this later, recorded on YouTube, if you look in the description down below, you'll also see a link. That takes you straight to the Village Books website, where all of the books are listed by our featured authors today. So I encourage you to click through if you're feeling so inspired by what you hear today, to follow that link and purchase, support these authors, these poets, and an independent bookstore. We would appreciate it. I am going to let you know we're going to disable the chat just for the duration of the presentation. We're going to bring it back for the Q&A. So don't worry, you will have an opportunity to say, huzzah, congratulations, well done, ask any questions. Also, if you think of any questions during the presentation that you would like to ask any of these writers, if you look below me, it says ask a question. At any time during the presentation, you can click on ask a question and type in whatever it is that you want to know right there. And we will gather the questions there, and we'll get to them when we do the Q&A portion of the presentation. So I want to state that the virtual readings gallery is a safe space. Any user exhibiting offensive or inappropriate behavior will be dismissed from the event immediately. Okay, so it's my pleasure to host 3 poets in 3 time zones today. We have Jessica Gigo here in Washington. She's presenting her book, Feeding Hour. And we have Jen Stewart Fueston joining us from Boulder, Colorado to present Madonna Complex. And all the way from the other Washington, DC, we have Chloe Yelena Miller, who is going to be here presenting Viable. I am so happy that all these ladies are here today. And first, we are going to hear from the poet who kind of brought all of them together today. So the organizer of today's event. So Jessica Gigo, excuse me, sorry, Jessica, is a poet, a farmer, a teacher, and a musician. She has a small farm in Bow, Washington called Harmony Fields that makes artisan sheep cheese, and she grows organic herbs. I've been there. It's lovely. Her second book, which is Feeding Hour, was published in November of last year by Trail to Table Press. Her first book is called Flood Patterns. Her writing appears in several publications such as Orion, Taproot, Gastronomica, The Hopper, and Poetry Northwest. So she's going to kick off today telling us a little bit about how today's event came to be. So please join me in welcoming Jessica Gigo.
Great. Thank you for having me, and just let me know if you have any issues hearing me. It's great to be with you all today. I'm really excited to be reading with these 2 other poets who also had books coming out during this pandemic, this very interesting time to be releasing a book. And so we've connected online, and I love their work. And so I'm really excited to be welcoming them to Bellingham virtually today. I wish I could show you Village Books because it's such a beautiful bookstore, but maybe that'll be on the list of things to do once the pandemic is over. So I want to start actually by introducing Jen Fueston, and as Claire mentioned, she's coming to us from Colorado, and she is the author of Madonna Complex, which Claire also shared with you, as well as the chapbook Latch, which is from River Glass Books. And I have a copy of this as well. It's a beautiful book. And she has a third book, Visitations by Finishing Line Press. Her poems have been published or are forthcoming in AG&I, Western Humanities Review, Structo, Spoon River Poetry Review, and elsewhere. She is a native of Colorado, and she has taught writing at the University of Colorado Boulder, as well as internationally in Hungary, Turkey, and Lithuania. And I've only met Jen in person once at a writing conference, but we've stayed connected online. And I don't know, as a mom, I really, and a writer who tends to be at home a lot working by myself, I really have appreciated all these online opportunities to be with other writers. And so Jen had a wonderful idea of reading each other's poems. So I'm going to start off our reading by reading one of her poems called What the Mother Says on Birthdays. We had looked for you for days, for weeks. The probe between my thighs by then a practice pinch. Before you were a twinkle, that's the saying, but should better be before you were a sliver in your mother's side, a hiccup or a sting. I saw you, pebble on the monitor, my neck lifting off the sterile pillow to tilt toward the TV. Your brother, entertained by goldfish crackers in his stroller tray beside me. Transvaginal made me think of Trans-Siberian, some wilderness of train tracks, wind whipping over barren wastes. Or of transatlantic, the swollen silver bellies of the plains glinting off the surface of the sea. You journeyed toward us slowly, at least the half of you I held. It was like peering in the brain to watch a thought at its inception, a poem struggling for form before its words. Maybe I had wanted just to keep you to myself, the way some memories are kept beautiful unsaid. I held you longer than I should, when all the body asks of me, release. So I want to turn this over to Jen. Welcome.
Thank you so much, Jessica, for that really beautiful reading. And thank you for the invitation to join with this group of writers today. We were just reminiscing about the only time that Jess and I have met, I think, in DC a few years back, and I was carrying an 8-month-old and she was pregnant with her young one. And so I'm thrilled to be able to sort of share our book babies now today. So I'm going to read a little bit from my book. Came out last April, conveniently a month into pandemic. So I haven't had a lot of opportunity to read, but I'm just really enjoying these online events, which have opened up a whole sort of series of possibilities. So my book, Madonna Complex, is it's very preoccupied as a whole with femininity and the aspect of motherhood. And obviously the word Madonna brings to mind all these sort of religious images as well. So one of the sections of the book really delves into sort of my experience with secondary infertility, which was what the poem that Jess read deals with. So I'm going to read, I think, primarily from that section of the book today. But as a whole, it is a book that's really interested in questioning sort of the messages that women receive about how it is we are to live and where those messages come from, the different sort of artistic depictions that we encounter. So I'm going to read a couple that will, I think, align with some of the work that the other two poets are reading today from the section of the book that definitely delves into motherhood. So I'm going to read one called Trying to Conceive. Last month, the test was negative, and another you did not cohere. They measured blood in little vials, gave me pills to make the bleeding come or go, and every day I dipped a sticky slip of paper in a little cup. They laid me out on tables, peering in to see if you were there, but you were not. There was not even a you to not be, so nothing has been lost at all, just time. It's hard to conceive how things might be if you were. My belly growing taut and thick, my mind arranging space for you in ordered lives, and how we decorate, dust off the bassinet. But every months and otherwise, each possible eludes us, swept off like seedlings washed downhill by rain. This, the nature of things. What finally comes to being comes with shadows, carries with it all the absences that rest in everything. So another thing I was quite sort of preoccupied with when I was nursing and carrying my second son was just all the language surrounding young childhood. So I'm going to read another poem, and this is where I took the title of my chapbook, Latch, which a lot of the poems in Latch appear in my book as well, but it's just a book that I really wanted to push myself to go deeply into the embodied experience of young motherhood. So this one's called Latch. What they don't
Okay. It looks like her connection was disrupted. So looks like she's reconnecting or attempting to. I'm wondering about her connection strength. Let's see.
Well, it's good. That's a good way to build some tension into a poem too. A little bit
I
of
know.
waiting time.
I am very much interested in hearing this particular poem.
We can wait, and I'm happy to read some too while we're waiting. Just let me know what you prefer, Claire.
Okay. I do want to hear Jen reading her poem. I was thinking one of us could go ahead and read Latch. Oh, I think she's joining us again. Hooray!
Dramatic entrance. Welcome.
And, my internet could not be stronger, but I am now getting some feed. So hold on. How about now? No.
I can hear you fine.
Okay. I'm gonna do this. I know that's dangerous. Are you guys can?
I can hear an echo now.
Okay.
Oh, I think you might be open in two. Are you possibly open in two windows on your computer?
I'm sorry?
Are you open in more than one window on your computer,
No.
perhaps?
Mm-mm.
Oh, are you still hearing an echo?
Yes.
We are not.
Okay, I'll do my best.
How about if you turn your volume down while you read? We can hear you.
Look at us. Troubleshooting. That works. Okay.
Okay.
Oh, it's troubleshooting technology.
We'll give you the screen again.
I just can't hear you guys. So I apologize for that. I have a great internet strength, so I don't know what happened there. So I'm going to start over with Latch. Thank you guys for your patience. Latch. What they don't remind you is that milk can be a verb. The specialists who come to tilt the baby to your breast. Your lost modesty surprises as you wrestle with a nipple toward the socket of his mouth. Your audience assesses every latch, the rounding of his lips against the milk white of your chest. For now, you are his everything. A symbiosis forms between supply and his demand, the most primal of economies. What they don't discuss is that milk is still a verb, and you're its object. So as I was mentioning, the book as a whole is really interested in sort of all these different depictions of women's experiences. So I have quite a number of ekphrastic pieces that look at depictions of women and mothering. And so I wanted to read one that is based on one of the better known paintings of the Annunciation to Mary. So this is called The Virgin, Home from the Mall. Dante Gabriel Rossetti's is my favorite, an annunciation to the sullen, Mary, thin and limp-haired, slumped against the whitewashed wall, imaginary shopping bags strewn carelessly at her feet. Her lips are rose, precisely lined. She stopped off at Sephora for this shade, thornberry. She likes the way it stains her mouth as if it's pricked, like Sleeping Beauty's finger on the spindle. She's fairy tale, half asleep. A slip of skin so translucent she's invisible. The way young mothers are invisible, receptacles for bread or salt, laundry or children, history or soap, emptied of everything but light. In her earbuds, hidden by that yellow halo, voices whisper words of wisdom, let it be. Only now she notices this stranger's feet are flame. He's suspended in the air beside her bed, a dream settling like cloth. Before the moment of enveloping, there's pause between the utterance and acceptance. She bends, a heavy blossom, her body a parenthesis. She curves away from glory, like we all do. Do a couple more. One thing I'm really interested in as well in my work is how sort of the boundaries between the personal and the political start to dissolve the more intensely you get into your sort of mothering practice. So this is one that I've read it at a number of readings. So if you're a friend of mine and you're attending, you're going to hear it again. But I wrote this one the day of the Women's March in 2017 in January. So this is called To the Women Marching, from a Mother at Home. And my son was about 8 months old at the time that I wrote this. So it is cold and my son is small. I rock him in the fragile boat of my body between this night's dark and a brighter shore. We are always awake. He curves at my breast like a comma, between the words anchored deep in my chest and the breath taking form in his lungs. In the quiet, we hear you chanting. Remember us with you. We are the rear guard. I am carrying him like a banner. Feel him cutting his teeth on my curdled milk. I am sharpening him like an arrow. So I think in the interest of making sure we have plenty of time for Q&A at the end, I'm just going to read one more that isn't necessarily a mothering poem, but I have come to read it as one. It's called Desert Parable, and I think that a lot of us who've been trying to do creative work in these young childhood years, and also throughout this last year, sort of a desert of the pandemic, it's come to mean something to me just about how to survive in times that are lean. So I'll end with this one, and then I'll introduce our next reader. So this is Desert Parable. A dragonfly kites to the corner of the room, its body a silver pin, tissue wings a desert's vellum, a parchment scribed with the short story of rain. High desert's stucco emptiness is mapped by bare arroyo, arid canyon, a nothing writ with pinyon, yucca, succulents by crows aloft on updrafts, tattooing themselves on clouds. Brief rain arrives to succor brittle bark, demands do much with little, as one leaf with its gathered light. So thank you guys so much for having me come and join you. It's my pleasure to introduce Chloe Yelena Miller, who'll be reading next. Chloe just released her book, Viable, this week, and I've had the privilege of getting to take a peek at it in anticipation of introducing her. Chloe lives in Washington, D.C. She's a writer and a teacher. Her poetry chapbook, Unrest, was published by Finishing Line Press. She teaches writing at the University of Maryland Global Campus and the Politics and Prose Bookstore, as well as privately. Chloe has an MFA in creative writing from Sarah Lawrence and a BA from Smith College. So I'm going to read a poem of Chloe's that as I was looking through her book this week, I just loved the resonances in it. So this is called Short Duet, Dualities. Unlike you who stopped being 2 weeks ago, still tucked inside, points of light, almost fireflies searching for someone, mate or prey, but then empty air, my internal eye, pressure flashes like an alarm. On the medical screen, a rounded sack, galactic space debris, that particular quiet of a single heartbeat. Words, rhythm, originates in blood flow, the opening and closing of chambers. Internal iambic pentameter, here I am, left with one song. The doctor probes, searches for you where you were. Removal. 3 vaginal abortion pills for $4.35, 1 sick day, generic pain medication, hot water bottle, and tea. The opening and closing. Release. Goodbye, my sweet. The noun miscarriage conducts images like electricity. My mother pushed her baby in a tall red carriage. Here, sunshine, there, a new bonnet. Shocks, seen and unseen beneath the tires. So let's welcome Chloe.
Thank you, Jen. It was such an amazing idea, too, to hear our own poems read by someone else. That was really a great experience. Thank you. And your poems were so beautiful. The poem, here I wrote it down, with another you in the very beginning, and the phrase, milk can be a verb. I forgot the title of the poem, but the turn it takes, just gorgeous. Thank you. So thank you to Village Books for hosting this lovely event. I really hope to come and visit one day and come inside the bookstore. I hope that everyone will support the bookstore by purchasing our books, lots of other books. Thank you to Lily Poetry Review Books and our publisher and editor, Eileen Cleary, for this book, Viable, which came out on Valentine's Day. It is a lyrical memoir about miscarriage, a difficult second pregnancy, and postpartum depression. So I've organized the poems into 4 sections, and it's chronological from right after the miscarriage, the second pregnancy, after the birth, and then apologies. And there's an opening and a closing poem. I opened the book with a quote from the picture book, The Book of Mistakes by Corinna Lukin, and it reads, "Do you see how with each mistake she is becoming?" And I think that's a really important part of the arc of this book, of how we're accepting of ourselves as mothers and the new being in our life, and accepting all that we have been to become who we are now. Specifically about miscarriage, there's just so much silence around this issue, even though about 20% of pregnancies end in miscarriage, and hoping that these stories in the poems really help to open up the conversation, and I can be a part of this dialogue, which is often unspoken. So I will first start by reading a poem titled Carrying from the first section. Carrying. Advice. Slice the avocado around the wide middle and across again until the quarters split. Drop the pit in the trash, scoop the flesh with a spoon. But it's never that easy. Should I have pierced 4 toothpicks into the sides of the pit, balanced it halfway in water, waited for a sprout? Should I have willed life by the windowsill? Most miscarriages aren't mama's fault, doctors say. No one says much else. Silent first trimester, breasts and uterus bulge, strange hungers. Slow shrinking after removal, night sweats, repeated dream. Someone calls my name. I have hope inside of me is a Greek pregnancy euphemism. Funnel clouds trace the land as leaves flip in the wind. I stand in a basement doorway, emergency pack on my back. How do I know when it's over? No siren screamed when the doctor said the fetus has no heartbeat. My legs in a stirrup, I couldn't rush to shelter. To be such a weak verb, to howl, to breathe, to linger, more viable. To be as in she is, she isn't, she was, she wasn't. State of being irregular. Carriage, someone behind the curtains. Such magic. Miscarriage, the undoing, avocado pit, dry in the trash. And from the next section, carrying from the 5th week of pregnancy, question of love. A young woman I loved quickly again after each inevitable end. You, I must love you later. You, cradled behind my pelvic bone. I can't admit this love yet. This next poem is titled Birth Announcement. It starts with an epigraph that is a collage of things on Facebook, which are both true and made up. They probably sound familiar to you when you hear them. So the epigraph reads, we are beyond excited, so blessed, immediately in love. What a bundle of joy. Mom and baby are doing great. Can hardly believe it. She's perfect. What a peanut of perfection. Everything perfect. Those toes and fingers, my bundle of joy. So many precious moments. Words can't describe how much I love you already. I loved you the minute I saw you. Birth announcement. Empty, I'm a renamed woman. Mom, holding a baby. He screams, tonsils red, tongue vibrates like a revving engine. He screams and screams and screams. Oh, the screams. My ears pulsate as I clean myself, daily pill schedule scrawled on the mirror. My incision itches, pain pulls, reaches through my muscles and nerves as I walk out of the room, out of the house, down the sidewalk, at the clearing, sunshine between maple trunks. This next poem I've titled Italian Vocabulary Lullaby Tutto. And I have a series of definition poems that are either Italian vocabulary poems or English vocabulary poems. There are some in this collection, in my chapbook, Unrest. And my goal is to look at the language and try and define a particular word for an image or a metaphor or a scene of some sort. I grew up Italian American, but I learned Italian in college. It was really hard for me. I did very badly. Eventually, I did learn it, and I was able to go back and live and work in Italy for a number of years. But it really gave me a sense of looking at the second language and English as well with some distance. So I would love to hopefully expand on this series and try and do more with these. Italian Vocabulary Lullaby Tutto, from when my child was 10 weeks old. We're all together, tutti. Mommy's here, daddy's here, you're here, we're all together. Tutti, tutti, tutti. You have everything you need. Tutto. You have food to eat, you have clothes to wear, you have a home, you have everything you need. Tutto, tutto, tutto. Tutti, tutto, tutti. Everything, singular and plural. This next poem is from when our child was 8 months old, and it's titled Sibling. I was pregnant for 9 weeks, and then I wasn't. Then I was pregnant for 37 weeks, and here you are. Will I tell you you have a sister? I think about her due around Thanksgiving. She'd be walking, sputtering words, on your hands and knees, pumping up and down, rubbing to crawl. You look at me. There's a question in your eyes. Yes, yes, it's okay. Keep growing. I won't say, you are here, because she isn't. I won't say, sometimes I don't remember to remember her. And the final section of the poems is a collection of apologies. There's some, I thought a lot about whether or not to include apologies. The publisher was asking, is there something to apologize for? But it felt, maybe there isn't, maybe there is, but it does feel like there is a sense of looking back and apologizing and asking for forgiveness. And this first one I'll read is Erasure Apology, and an erasure poem is where you take a piece of text and then delete a number of words, sometimes someone else's text, in this case my own. Erasure Apology relies on a text that is purposely or even deleted in places. Words gain meaning, of those are missing. The result is a new, creative, maybe, even one that is emptiness and deletion offer and newly paired words. I am sorry. I cannot find the best form for mourning and apology. From the same section, Gender Apology, it has an epigraph from Kelly Hansen Mayer's poem, first poem in Tremolo. And the epigraph reads, wanted a memoir but didn't have the pronouns. Gender Apology. I claimed you in my own likeness, a girl. You, a yet-to-be girl, but you were simply a baby to be. And before I read my final poem, I'd like to bring your attention to the very back. You can't really see it here, where I've gathered together resources and books that were of use to me. I had a really hard time finding a community or other voices that spoke to me. And the ones that I did find, I put together here. I've since located even more, and I'll be putting those together in some form and sharing them. Hopefully some of them speak to you as well. Megan O'Rourke has a beautiful memoir that ends with similar listing of resources as her memoir on the Long Goodbye, where she's lost her mother and she's looking outward towards other pieces of literature. So I've kind of modeled the form after that. Your Creation Story. And this has an epigraph from the Smithsonian Magazine, Do Trees Talk to Each Other by Richard Grant, March 2018. For young saplings in a deeply shaded part of the forest, the network is literally a lifeline. Lacking the sunlight to photosynthesize, they survive because big trees, including their parents, pump sugar into their roots through the network. Your Creation Story, when our child was 6. That time, your father was a stranger to me. He leaned against the statue of a man on a horse. The man's eyes sprouted from fallen seeds and rain. Your father and I said, hello, in the middle of a New York City square. He rolled up a newspaper, there were newspapers then, and we walked. I tripped over uprooted sidewalk slabs, city planning be damned. We ate outside, ignored the squirrels and pigeons. A few seasons later, we imagined the possibilities of a you, a tiny seed with a full coat. You and I swelled outward as your coat split, and I found clothes that stretched. In an office built over subway tunnels, we saw your silhouette, lit as if science were magic. We heard your quickly beating heart, walked home, our footsteps adding to the rhythm. 3 weeks early that spring, you came into the dry world. That is all true, but also not, because so much is missing, like the sun impossibly above us, here and not, warming us just enough. It comes to this. Your creation is yours. I was your home. Now we all nudge you forward, make room for you to see out. Balancing between the creek and trees, we walk the pipe path. Sometimes you run ahead, but we keep you in our sight. Thank you. So I would like to introduce Jessica Gigo, and she has brought us all together here, which is amazing, and especially during this blank year of the pandemic and not leaving the house and not getting to see anyone, it has been remarkable to connect with other poets online. So I really appreciate her work to put us together and get to learn more about one another. Feeding Hour by Jessica Gigo. The sheep cluster, signaled by habitual gate and bucket clatters. I am a daybreak messenger of provisions, barley, oats, and hay. Liminal, ruminant, what is left of their wild survives by each bite. I am a witness of their ravenous hunger. I am their caretaker. I am the caretaker of their tamed want. Thank you. I look forward to your reading.
Thank you so much for reading that poem, and thank you guys for bringing your beautiful work here. It's just, I want to keep hearing you guys read, but I will, I'll share some poems. And I love the idea of having a resource list at the back of your book, Chloe. That's great. Yeah, Feeding Hour came out in November, about a week after the election. So I've kind of been slowly sharing it with the world. And it's poems, you know, an alternate title could be poems written between 2015 and 2020, but that is really the time that I've been deeply entrenched in early motherhood. So a lot of poems are about that experience. And it's also coincidentally a time when we expanded our sheep flock. So I don't recommend doing those things at the same time, but you learn as you go. And so I do spend a lot of time learning from my animals as well. So it's broken down into 4 sections. The first is called Birth Stories. The second is Digging. The third is Familiar Truths. And the last is Mothering. So I'd like to read a few poems from each section. This first poem is called Birth Story 1. And this is from a series also called Birth Story. Before dawn, the ewe scratches the hay with her front hoof, making an opening to lay and push. Her lambs will be coming soon. I watch silently through the slanted, sacred path of barn door sunrays. On Sunday morning, new life, hungry, drenched in consecrated waters, rises on unfamiliar terrain. Trusts the mother's stern bleat, waits for the next one she knows is coming, before the day even begins. I'm going to read another one from that series. This is called Birth Story 2. She extends one noble hoof like a dancer for leverage. A black lamb drops. Your call came and I answer. It had been a while. Instead of canceling the session, we talk over the phone about parents and parenting, current joys and frustrations. Meanwhile, another lamb drops, then another. The experienced you tends to them all. I watch her diligence as we continue to examine me. Steam rises from newly emerged bodies. This you does not need my help, but I need her to teach me all she knows about animal bodies and miracles, mothering and being mothered. It is the perfect setting, in fact, for therapy. I am more open than usual, feeling my way through the obscure canals of postpartum emotions as these new lives join the seasoned flock. And this next poem is from the section called Digging. It's called Digging Up Irises. My bearded irises bloomed in early May. I dug them up and separated the corms under a sweaty sun. While I worked, I could hear the thumping of the neighbor son's music, then the roar of 5 teenage boys in a small above-ground pool. Irises represent awareness. I could not see them, but the sounds were as jolting as when the father lectures his son about basketball moves, or when the mother frantically mows at 11 p.m. with headlights, because God forbid a lawn covering farmland should not be longer than a putting green. I made new spaces for these tired roots. I did not complain about the noise. I kept digging and planting, remembering that the veil of separation is thin, and life, like a rhizome, is resilient and always connected. The flower speaks, let go. Eventually, the sounds fade to only whispers buried in my chest. The conversation that begins when we turn the world out and point the spade in. Let's see, I want to read, really want to just talk to you guys, but I'm going to keep reading poems here. I actually really wanted to read this poem. It's called Eclipsed, and it was included in an anthology called For Love of Orcas, which was a fundraiser for orca awareness and research around orca health in the Puget Sound. And because there was a new calf that was recently born, I wanted to read this poem. Eclipsed. Out of the ocean, mother lifts limp half-moon young. The grief goes on for days. How we celebrated the passing shadow across the sun, yet we neglect generations of yin-yang bodies that arc and sing. Mysterious tides reflecting sky. Our sea now a cauldron of loss and plastic. Our collective future, a hazy regret. I want to read a couple from the last section. This one's called The Object. The object of Impressionism is an accurate depiction of color and light. The tea rose hue of Cassatt's maternité, mother and suckling babe, a sea of pink and gentle brown, sets my heart pulsing, makes me believe that as she learns to swim, fall, run, she will remember my first invitation to life, my first real gift that infused her blood and bones, echoes, bowls full of hope. And this is a poem called Carry On. I check my suitcase. I have one personal item to carry through the terminal, on the plane. It's light, almost too light. I pat the pockets, looking for what's missing. Tickets, yes. Wallet, yes. Book that I have been meaning to read, yes. My hand runs over my stomach. I feel a fading ache in my breast. I never imagined what leaving her for the first time would feel like. Rain plasters the tarmac. I must go. I must never leave you. And I want to end with one poem from the section called Familiar Truths. And this is one I wrote about my grandma, who I write about a lot. I think I'll kind of always be writing poems about my grandma, who passed away about 10 years ago, but she's always kind of with me, especially in my mothering journey. Recipe box. It's still lovely. Floats from your kitchen as you turn fat and grain and leaf into dinner. I sit in the next room and flip through index cards in the long tin box. A life story told by ingredients, sauce stains and tattered edges. The box came back to me 6 years later. Sage meatloaf, tangy cheese spread, good rhubarb crumble, green bean and turkey casserole. You always served more than enough, applauded the empty plate. Here in the shadow light of my kitchen, I flip the cards again like they are tarot, predicting my future. How does this mother find the time? Your voice says frankly, never skip a step or an ingredient, and clean, dear one, as you go. Thank you. I think I'm going to end there so we've got some time here for questions. I know Claire's going to open the chat back up. I really wanted to acknowledge Claire from Village Books, who's been so wonderful in putting this reading together. And I didn't say this, but my book is out with Trail to Table Press, which is an imprint of Wandering Aengus Press over on Orcas Island. And so, Jill, if you're in the audience, thank you so much. And I really think I'm ready to chat with you guys. I have so many questions for you. And I'm just so grateful for the work that you're doing, like Chloe said, to bring awareness to some of these issues around motherhood, or just what motherhood is, because I feel like it's really the stuff of life. It's not just this sort of subcategory. It's gory, right? It's real. There's so much to learn, and I don't know if I'll always write poems about motherhood, but I feel like I'm learning so much as a young mom. Well, I don't consider myself young, but I have young children, which is maybe another poem too in there. But I really wanted to start off with some questions about, well, with the question I had in that last poem is where does the mother find the time? And, you guys are here. Oh, Claire.
Well, I want to address one sound thing. I want to make sure that Jen can hear fine.
Okay.
I can hear. Can you guys hear me?
We can hear you fine. Are you having still an echo situation?
I'm not anymore. I think I had 2 windows open when I tried to come back in. So I think that's what happened. Yeah.
Okay. And then last, Chloe, I'm going to, Chloe, ask you to put your headphones on, because there's a little bit of kind of an undercurrent when you're not muted we can hear you fine. I don't know if anybody else is hearing it, but there's a little bit of a hiss. I think that will go away if you plug in. So.
Great.
Okay.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay.
And so you're plugged in now?
Yes.
Okay. I don't know. I'm still here. And it's not like a roar or anything. It's just kind of there. But we can hear you just fine.
We'll just say it's like a womb. I
feel like we're in an ultrasound right now. We're in the cover of Chloe's book right now.
Yeah, I love that.
So yes, please. I'm sorry, Jess. Go your question. What was your question? How does one find the time?
Well, that's a question I ask in one of my poems. How does the mother find the time? And I'm curious, as poets, how do you find the time to be a poet? Which sometimes it doesn't take long to write a poem, right? But the mind space and the heart space to really generate material and to actually write material and edit it. Like, how do you find the time to be poets? I really want to know. Because I'm a work in progress on that one.
I have fairly strong opinions about a lot of this, like writing advice about write every day, as being the kind of thing you say if you've never been a caregiver. And it makes me sort of infuriated. So a few years ago, I came up with a list of things for myself that constituted being a writer every day, even if I wasn't writing something. And I actually broke them out by time that would be required. So like if I had 15 minutes, I could submit a poem. If I had an hour, I could write a poem. If I had 10 minutes, I could tweet somebody and thank them for their poem. So that actually resulted in quite a lot of good work for me, because it just kept me in the mindset that, like, I'm always a writer. I am not writing every day, but I can tailor what time I have to different series of tasks. So that was my approach.
That's really brilliant. I tried to do something like that in the beginning of this year with a date book that a friend gave me, where I wrote something each day that I did. And maybe it was read a poem, similar to what you're saying, small tasks, not always actually writing. But then I stopped, like all New Year's resolutions. I think it's really pandemic aside, I don't know how you do anything in a pandemic with everyone home. But there seem like there are waves of possibility and calm. And I'm really amazed at how development for kids seems to be, oh no, everything has changed. Oh, okay, you figured it out. Now it's calm. It's changed again. And I think the writing kind of comes with those moments of calm. School in person helps. I don't know. Yeah. What do you do, Jess?
Well, it's not very romantic, but my phone is like my, where I write everything. I'm amazing what I actually like cut and paste from my notes. So I've lost a little bit of like, I don't have any rules about when and how to write, although I love sitting at my desk with a cup of coffee and a journal, but That's rare. It's really rare these days.
That's
So
rare.
sometimes lying in bed or riding shotgun, I take it when they come at this point. But and maybe that's not a bad thing. I don't know.
We were at the museum today with my boys, and I had museum thoughts happening, and I just was like, hold on, mommy's got poem thoughts, and I just typed it into my notes. So yeah, nothing.
I love that. Mommy's got poem thoughts. That's great. That's wonderful. Do you want to start on some of the questions that the audience is asking?
Yeah.
Because we have a question for Jen. Katie would like to know, she says, I know your boys are a bit older now and you've been writing more since you finished this collection. How would you say your writing has developed or shifted or continued from Madonna Complex? What are you working on now? This is a long question. What are you working on now, next? I'd also be happy to hear the other readers answer this question. I love hearing poets talk about their process and projects. So I think we heard a little bit about your process as far as time, and but this notion of how your writing has developed or shifted or continued from Madonna Complex and what you're working on now or next.
It's funny because when I finished the book, it was just right before pandemic hit, and I had started to sort of think for myself what my next series of topics. And I was like, I wrote my mother book. Now I'm going to write something else. Well, like I wrote almost nothing in the last 10, 11 months. And the things that I did write were once again motherhood related poems, because that was like all my life was for 11 months. So I do have an intention to kind of delve into some other directions, but I find that I'm, trying to respond to what we're all in the middle of right now. And I'm trying very much not to do it in sort of a obvious or cliched sort of way, but to push. I've been really interested in reading my grandmother's memoir of her life. And she was born in November of 1918, in the middle of the flu pandemic. And then she lost 3 siblings to a flu in the mid-20s. So I've been very interested in the loss that she experienced and how that shaped her. So I imagine that that's probably going to be a good component of where I go. So, yeah.
Does anybody else want to talk about that at all? She said that question was for everybody, too.
I've written a few poems / lyrical essays. Like Jen said, a little bit about the pandemic and the experience. They're a little disjointed. Maybe they're poems, maybe they're essays. I don't know. I've been for a few years now really slowly trying to build a memoir about being Italian American and my time in Italy. And it's hopefully funny. I mean, saying that you hope something's funny makes it not sound funny at all, but hopefully it's got kind of a humorous, more external look and less motherhood. But I've thought a lot about our identity as we spent a year in Italy with our child a couple of years ago, and thinking about his relationship to the language and the country and where our family's from, what this means. So maybe it'll end up being a motherhood memoir. I don't know, but probably I'll work on it next year. Oops. Oh no, I didn't mean to do that.
Oh, you're still with us though.
I think your camera's off. Yeah.
As long as you're still with us, we don't want to lose
fine.
you.
Yeah.
There you are. Hooray.
And it's like a video game. We can kind of move around.
Exactly. Any more thoughts on that? Are we ready for the next one?
I can just add quickly.
Yeah,
I'm
Jessica,
also,
please.
I've been experimenting with memoir, and it's funny going from poetry to memoir because I think, oh man, I just wrote so much, and then it's like, I have a 30-page memoir. So it's fun just experimenting with other genres. But I've been trying to write about climate change, and a lot of my poems have ended up being from the perspective of a mother. And I find that very hard to write compelling work about such a huge topic, and where to start with it. And so I don't know. I hope that continues, but that's been kind of what's been coming up for me.
Well, I just want to thank all of you for every single one of you had something that resonated very much personally for me. Different things. I don't know. Jessica is aware, but Chloe and Jen are probably not aware that the book group that I lead for Village Books is specifically a motherhood book group. We read books that feature themes of motherhood. In fact, a few of my book group members are in the audience today. Hello, ladies. So I really appreciated so much of what I heard today. And things you've gotten me thinking about things that I had forgotten, and I'm glad to be reminded of even difficult things, particularly the pieces from Viable, having had a miscarriage myself. So memories and feelings that I kind of forgotten that I'd had, and am glad to be reminded of. And Latch, thank you for Latch. Milk is still a verb, and you are an object. Yeah. and then Jess, the talking about your grandmother, and the objects. I have so many objects in my kitchen that were my grandmother's that are so very important to me. Measuring spoons, measuring cups, things like that, that every time I use them, I think about my grandmother. And so anyway, thank you. I just wanted to interject my gratitude before we move on to the next thing. So for a question for Chloe, I noticed that you had an event this past week in which some of your poems were put to music. Can you talk, and this question is coming from someone named Jen Stewart Fueston. Can you talk about the process and how that came about, that you had your poetry put to music?
Yeah, it was amazing in the end. So a friend saw the composer, her name is Florence Pavelko, saw her call for, I think it was poems about motherhood, and she said, you should submit to this. And I was like, okay, that's weird. I don't know what could come of it. And we connected. She loved the poems. We talked about which one she was going to choose. It was at that time she was a graduate student. And then it's since become this art song where she put together a number of poems to music, and they've been performed. One has been performed with an orchestra. Otherwise, it's like a single soprano singing to a piano. It's not exactly a collaboration in that she took the poem and then did something completely different. It feels like the most extreme translation of one art into another art, that she took these tiny little poems and then created this whole song, which is amazing. And there's a recording. It's not quite up yet, but there's a recording. And for all the poets in the room, we started, Lauren really manages it, a group. I think it's Composers and Poets Connect on Facebook. I can look for it and put it in the chat if people are interested, because it's a really cool way to find other composers. And they sound, as a group that I've heard from recently, really interested in contemporary, everyday language kind of work about experiences, because there's so many really traditional pieces that they're used to singing or composing. I'll look for that.
Okay, sorry, I was trying to help somebody in the audience who's having some technical issues. And my advice is log out and log back in. So next question, let's see. Vera says, a question for Jess. I never noticed until I heard you out loud that you sounds like you. EWE sounds like YOU. And so I think that Vera appreciates that whole new layer of you and you.
Yeah, we have endless sheep puns in our house. So
I bet you do.
Yeah. Thanks, Vera. Thanks for being here.
That's funny. Okay, and Melissa says, as a mother and poet myself, I love seeing more writing published on the experience of motherhood, especially in the past 5 years or so. What are some recently published poets or collections on mothering that you've loved? So there's two parts to this question. So first, let's tackle that. Do any of you have favorite collections or published poets that specifically feature mothering?
My friend Katie Manning is in the audience, and she has a wonderful book, and the name of it has just flown from my brain. So maybe she can put it in the chat.
Yes, put it in the chat, Katie. What's the name of your book?
Published by Tasty Other. Thank you, Sally. Tasty Other by Main Street Rag, which is a series of like pregnancy dream poems. And she was like, I read her book before I was starting to work on my Latch book. And I was just like, I love these. They're so weird and they're so embodied and wonderful. So I like that. And then I just read, which is not a book that is a book of poetry, but it is this written by a poet. So this is Department of Speculation by Jenny Offal, who is a very poetic novelist and poet. And this is very like intense early childhood, like the baby has colic, and she's just like rendering this experience really palpably. And I just love how the book is written because it's very much little chunks, very imagistic. So I really dug that. So those are my two suggestions.
Anyone else?
Sarah Manguso's Ongoingness, which is a lyrical poem essays about the changing nature of time after motherhood. I barely had time to read it when I was first reading it, but it really spoke to me. And the prose/lyrical writing is just gorgeous. And much more recently, Megan Leonard has a book titled The Book of Lullabies, which is beautiful. And there's some funny little moments and sad moments. And it's really about motherhood and the body. You'll all love it.
Yeah, I'll just add this book. I happen to have it right next to me, but The Clearing by Alison Adair, which is through Milkweed. It's also really excellent. It came out end of last year.
Oh, that's beautiful. Okay, so the second part of that question from Melissa was, and this one is, she's right, it is difficult to phrase this question. The question has to do with mothering being treated in literature as a separate territory. Do you feel a sense of your work being siloed, and what do you do with that? That's a tough one.
Well, I can respond. I mean, it's interesting. I think I've read a lot of memoirs on motherhood, and another book that I think is really excellent is Ordinary Insanity, looking at fear in motherhood, which is a general nonfiction book that came out last year by Sarah Menkedik. And her first book, Homing Instincts, is also excellent. But it's funny, poetry is kind of siloed, and so it's interesting writing, motherhood, writing about motherhood in poetry, because you can kind of start to associate it with a lot of other things anyway. So I feel like there's more opportunity in poetry in a way to explore than in other genres. And that's actually what I'm working on now, is trying to write about early motherhood in prose. And I do feel a bit more restricted. And I guess I'm very proud to be a mother poet, but I don't necessarily think I'm writing myself. I'm not a mother. I'm not always going to be a mother poet, or, like Sylvia Plath wrote a lot about motherhood, but she's not commonly referred to as a mother poet. She just really dove into it. And she also, I guess I'll recommend Sylvia Plath as well. I mean, her poems about motherhood are very important to me. So yeah, I don't know. What do you guys think about that? I think it's a good question.
To me, that feels like a question that might have been more true, I don't know, in previous generations, or even 15, 20 years ago. I find so much. I think Jessica's right that like poetry is in and of itself such a niche and such a like little tiny community that like, I don't know, there's a lot of permission. But I don't understand the like, I guess maybe it's a fear of sentimentality, that like motherhood is inevitably going to result in these very hallmarky kind of things. But anybody who would say that has not actually done it. I mean, it's so messy. It's so embodied. It's so emotional. It's so real. And I'm like, frankly, it's like the most real thing that we do as human beings is pass on ourselves to a generation that we will not live to see, who then pass themselves on. I mean, like, what else is there, frankly? So I don't really get this like, oh, it's this little side. I mean, that's a denial of like human experience that gets me really soapboxy. But yeah, so there's my thoughts.
I don't know. I think I wrote a book about motherhood. Other things may be similar, they may not be. We'll see what happens. I don't know.
Okay, we have one last question, which is actually two questions. So the first one for Chloe and Jen. You both use studies of word and language, for example, transvaginal, Latch, the Italian vocabulary, in your poetry about motherhood. What kind of surprises did that word study bring or add to your projects?
I think to kind of back up, at least I write, and I think a lot of us write to answer a question that you learn. Oh, you're supposed to write what you know, but I don't think we're writing what we know. We write what we want to know. And it's hard when something is so intimate and a part of our own bodies to look at it closely without the distance of time that you usually require for writing. But in this case, you have such urgent questions, you need to write immediately. I think the looking at the words gives, at least for me, a distance to the experience to then be able to peek in and look at it more closely, not as an object exactly, but as a separate entity, and then bring it back in. There's maybe some distancing.
Okay.
I think my poems that get into sort of language parsing out are probably my own reaction to the way that language can kind of gloss over realities. I have another poem that I wanted to read and have time for, which is called Trying to Get My Body Back, which is that stupid phrase that you see in all the magazines about like so-and-so got her body back. And I just recoil, because that's language that is performing a function of like covering up a real experience. And so I think that my poems that delve into language are trying to take that cover off and examine like how language is functioning to hide something that we don't really want to look very closely at.
Okay, and then Jessica, how did your work with lambs bring new layers to your poems about motherhood? What surprises did it bring?
Oh, that's a great question. It's kind of ongoing. I mean, it was sort of just this novelty at first. We had, some pet sheep, and we had some good births, and then now we're kind of doing it more as a business. So that they are still kind of glorified pets, but they're also working animals. But it's really, I mean, I really learned so much, like watching. I mean, obviously we're very different species, but there's just the progression of how it happens, realizing that it's going to happen differently for individuals, how they birth, when they birth, how they handle it, how they bond with their young. I mean, I felt like it gave me hope for myself that I would be able to do it. And then after having children, I feel like I was such a better helper to my sheep. I mean, actually, I think I'm most helpful when I'm not bothering them, because I kind of want to get more involved than I should. But it just, you realize just how sacred it is and how natural it is. And, I think birth stories, I mean, I'm really interested in the concept of birth stories, because before I had kids, I never asked anyone I knew, what was your birth story? How did that happen? I go, oh, you have a baby. Great. Like something happened, but I had no idea until I experienced it myself. And I think how you enter the world is such a profound thing. And I don't think there's a right or wrong way to enter the world. And so just in knowing that, I feel like I come to lambing season, which for us is in a couple of weeks, with a lot more humility and a lot more awareness of what's happening in these animal bodies.
Well, I think that we are pretty much to the end of our time, and we're out of the questions, so that's perfect. As I'm sure you can see in the chat, there is a lot of love over there. A lot of people saying thank you. and what a great reading. And I do want to thank all three of you and especially you, Jess, for putting this together. This was very special. And again, these are the books. Look at them all beautifully together. Look at that. They're gorgeous. So
thank you, Claire.
Of course, as a reminder, if you click that little green button below that says purchase books here, takes you right to our website where you can get all three of these books. And of course, these are signed copies because Jess is right down the road, close to where I live, actually.
I will add that Claire actually came to my house in the pandemic so I could sign my books. I'm so grateful. As if Village Books wasn't wonderful enough, but thank you, Claire.
Well, it gave me a chance to see your lovely farm. Oh my gosh, I kind of want to move in at your house, but that would be weird. So thank you all three, and thank you to the audience today. This was wonderful. Do any of you ladies have any parting words for us?
Just want to thank you all for coming, and thank you guys for your beautiful poems. And I hope one day to come and see this bookstore. It sounds beautiful.
Yeah, I echo that. Thank you so much for including us from a distance, and I will definitely stop in if I'm in the area. Thank you so much.
I just want to add my thank you. It's just great to be with you guys in this space, and I loved having this sort of out on the horizon as an event. And so just congratulations to you for having these beautiful books in the world. I'm really grateful to have them.
Yay.
Yes. Okay. And with that, I will say goodbye and thank you, everybody.
Thanks so much.